Hello. For those who don't know me, I'm Mrs. Prescott and I teach art at Bexleyheath Academy. Creating your own artwork has been proven to have therapeutic properties and can really help with your well-being. So I will be providing you with some videos which will be able to help you create your own artwork. Before you begin, you might want to equip yourself with some materials. If I share my screen with you, I'll be able to show you a list of some different materials that you might want to have a look at purchasing before creating some of your own artwork. So if I just present my screen now. Hopefully you can see my first slide coming on now. Okay, so to equip yourself with the proper art toolkit, you might want to buy or obtain some of the following. Paper. Okay, so it could be a sketchbook or loose A4 paper or loose A3 paper. If you're really enthusiastic, you might want to buy a canvas or canvas board. But what I find really nice to use sometimes is even old cardboard. For example, if you get packages from Amazon, the thick cardboard that comes from Amazon really does actually lend itself well to paintings. You might want to get yourself a starter set of acrylic paints. You might want to get yourself a good drawing pencil. A 2B is what I'd recommend normally if you're only going to get one. A rubber and a sharpener. A starter set of paintbrushes, or if you're going to get a single paintbrush, I'd get at least 3, a size 0, a size 6 and size 8. My personal favourite is a size 6 round-headed one though. A set of colour pencils and a set of oil pastels, though we probably won't be looking at using oil pastels for the next few videos. So this week is week 1 and we're going to be creating a sunset painting. This is a video we're going to be looking at in 2 parts. This is the first part and we will be looking at blending the colour techniques using paint. To do the sunset painting, what you really do need is the acrylic paint and card to put it on, okay? Some paper to paint on, a water pot, a paintbrush, preferably a flat-headed one, not my favourite, and like I said, a range of paints. On the screen are some examples of different types of colour paint with specific colours that you might want to look at when you're buying your paints. However, I'm going to stop just sharing my screen for a second, if it lets me. Okay, however, I'm going to use a variation on those colours that were on the screen just then. Okay, my paints I buy from the works because they're really nice and cheap. These big ones are, I think, £2 each, which is actually very cheap for acrylic paints. Like I said, though, you could just get a starter set, which would be smaller and probably even cheaper still. I'm going to be using the crimson red, just a normal white, a cerulean blue, and a ultramarine blue. And the yellow I'm going to be using is a orangey kind of yellow. It's actually not even got a name on this one. That's the yellow I'm going to be using anyway. As you can see, Amazon packaging comes in very useful. I'm going to be using that to put my paints on. It's nice and quick and easy, and it does mean that you don't have to do as much tidying away at the end. So to create your blended colour painting, the first thing you're going to have to do is to start at the top. So I'm going to use my flat-headed brush today. Okay, and I'm going to start with my first colour. So the first colour we're going to be using is going to be the blue. Okay, and we're going to keep it nice and dark. I've added a tiny bit of water, okay, but it's a nice thick use of acrylic paint. So we're going to paint starting off the top. I would say it's not even a quarter, okay. I would say to about there. I guess that's about a 1/5, okay, of my paper. And I'm going to do nice big horizontal lines. Okay, this is going to take me a little while because obviously I'm using A3 paper. If you're using A4 paper, it wouldn't take quite as long. You guys can be neater with your strokes as well. Okay, so they're nice straight horizontal lines. We don't want any vertical lines here. Okay, it starts to look a bit like you're painting a fence. Be careful of the drips of the paint, though they may come in useful later, and I'll explain why in a minute. So I'm going to paint right to the very top corners. Now, I'm using an easel today to present, okay, but it's actually better for this purpose if you don't use an easel because, as you can see, it's harder to get that top bit and we're using the entire paper for it. A way to get around that is if you drew a frame. If you drew a frame, obviously, then if you were using an easel or a board and you were taping it to something, you could tape it along that frame, which you could then just trim later on. So stick to the horizontal lines all the way across. It is very tempting to go vertically, like I just tried to do, and then realised, stop myself, because I'm trying to rush here just to get it done. You guys should take quite a long time to get a really nice texture of the paint. I don't know if you can see on my computer screen, probably not because of the light, but there's actually really nice textures now building up on the paint, where some of the paper, the texture is slightly thinner than others, which gives a kind of more naturalistic effect of the blue. So once you've done the first kind of strip of colour, what you're going to now do is you're going to now add some white. Now, as you can see on my lovely piece of cardboard, I've added white twice, okay? Because I'm going to now just literally not washing my brush, go straight into the white, okay? I'm going to paint my white so it's just slightly over the top of the blue, so it naturally blends itself together on the actual page. So you're not mixing the colours in the palette or my piece of cardboard, but you're actually blending the colours on the page itself. And because the paint is still wet, it actually lends itself to kind of really being really kind of effective in terms of those colours blending nicely together. You may intentionally leave some bits of the white slightly thicker, again, like with the blue, so it allows to kind of show that there's kind of light and dark areas to your sunset. Now, in the second video, I will be showing you how to refine some of these areas a little bit further, and which kind of like basically means making some improvements just to the neatness and the quality of the brush strokes. But for now, we want quite rough brush strokes. Like I said, horizontal, but it doesn't matter if they're not straight as a die. It doesn't matter if they actually, you know, aren't ruler straight or anything like that. Okay. I'm just going to about there with my white. Okay, so you can see as you get further away from the blue, more naturally, the white is actually getting whiter and whiter and lighter. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to now wash my brush in the water. Okay, remember when you rinse your brush in water, it actually does get a little bit more kind of, the paint gets more watery. So just be a bit more careful with your use of the paint because it might start to drip. Okay, so what I'm going to start doing now is I'm going to start adding my red. Okay, so I'm using quite a nice dark red. Okay, you may want to add a tiny bit of the blue to the red, okay, which will make it a bit more purpley, and obviously a bit of white will start making it a little bit more pink. So I'm kind of just mixing my colours here. So I'm kind of using, like I said, what is kind of a really pinky red already, but I'm just adding a bit more white to it to make it even more pinker. Some people tend to use almost like a bright magenta purple, which I think was what was recommended on the slide. It's kind of up to you, kind of with your personal preference, with the kind of like actual colours itself. So again, I'm blending on top of the white, so it kind of goes straight onto the top, which then lends very nicely to that actual blend. You can probably see when I'm putting the colour over the top that the red, or the pinky red, is actually not as blendable as the blue. Now this is because I've added white to the paint already, and when you add white to the paint, it does tend to make it quite a bit thicker in terms of the use of coverage on the paint. So it's kind of up to you if you want to then add a bit more white in, which could then add some more natural streaks, or if you want to just keep it kind of a solid red. I prefer it myself if it's not solid colour, because I do think it does look a little bit more natural in that sense. Okay, I'm just going to go. So this time with my pinky red, I'm actually taking a large part of the section of the paper. As you'll see, it's larger than the blue and the white. Okay, so we're kind of almost like halfway down the page now. Again, with those horizontal strokes. I think this part of the art is actually what I find most therapeutic, is actually painting itself. When you're painting block colour like this, it's all about kind of feeling the paint moving on the page and not really worrying about kind of making it look perfect or the details looking really, really kind of like realistic. It's actually more about just really enjoying moving that paint around the page. And I think that's really kind of a good part, the therapeutic element of art, that you can just use it to kind of push paint around a page. Okay, so I'm nearly finished doing that bit now. I'm adding a bit more white. If I show you my cardigan, you can see I've added a lot more white as I go, because I really want to kind of like add in mine So it's not just one thick, bold colour, that you've got like a mixture of the white and the red. And I'm just kind of judging it based on what I'm seeing in front of me. So I'm choosing when I want to add the white and the dark bits of red. Like I said, we're going to go back in the next video and make improvements to it once the paint is dry anyway. Okay, so once I get to this point here, I'm going to rinse my brush out again. Okay, you may want to just kind of like, especially using a bit of card's quite useful. You can just put the paintbrush onto the card. Okay, which you can see I haven't actually washed it that well, but it actually really helps because you can kind of see that I'm just using that to dry the brush off a little bit. Now I'm getting the yellow. Now, again, this is your kind of choice. I'm using this, like I said, it's actually not the most expensive acrylic paint. It hasn't got a name. Most paints will come with names on it. For example, this one, even from the works, is called Studio Yellow. But the one I'm using is kind of like, I guess it's a much deeper yellow. What, like I would say, more like an orangey type yellow. And again, I'm going back over the orange because orange and red are kind of mixed. I'm going to go back into that because orange has red in it. It allows the colour to really work well together. So it allows the kind of like red to really blend neatly. It's almost like a rainbow of colour because there actually is red in orange, which is why I think I prefer using a more orangey yellow than a straight yellow. So you're getting those really nice, rich, reddy oranges going down to almost like a brighter yellow near the bottom. And again, this is kind of a larger portion of the page. The top parts are actually quite small, and then I'm going into larger sections of the page as I go further down. So this is kind of the big kind of main part of the body of the sunset, whereas the blue at the top is kind of more of kind of the beginnings of the sunset as it's going up into the sky. Okay, again, horizontal. You can see I'm not using the water at all. Like I don't know if you can see that, but I'm not using the water at all. I'm literally just using the paint, the thickness of that really nice, luscious, thick acrylic, plasticky paint. Now, I should say, actually, be very careful when you're using acrylic paint. Now, I'm not wearing any protective clothing, but you need to be careful when using it because it is very, very hard to get out of clothes. I should have already said that at the beginning. It is really, really hard to get out of clothes. So just be very careful not to get it on your clothes. If you do get it on your clothes, I'd recommend nail varnish remover, but literally putting it in the wash straight away, treating it straight away because it can ruin clothes. And certainly don't wear your best clothes. Again, as well, my hair's got very long for lockdown. You may want to kind of clip or put your hair up so it's out of your eyes as well, because if acrylic paint gets in your hair, that is also not great because it does dry quickly, and it is kind of a very nice, luscious, thick plastic. It is made out of plastic, so it's kind of a plasticky paint. So nearly finished my sunset. The last section of my sunset is back into the white. Now, as you can see, and I've used quite a lot of paint just to demonstrate, I wouldn't recommend putting this much paint onto your palette straight away, but I have got white at the top and the bottom. That is because I've got the white that I've mixed with the red and the blue, and then this one here is kind of more of a clean white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally, without washing my paintbrush, go straight into that white. So it's now kind of making it a very yellowy white. And again, blending it so it's kind of over the top of the yellow. And it will, or the orangey yellow, I should say. And it's going to really kind of start making that orangey yellow go almost into a very bright yellow. So it's kind of like the bright light part of the sunset as we're finishing our picture. So again, horizontal lines. I can really smell the richness of the paint. I love the smell of this paint. It really reminds me of when I was doing my qualifications in art and spending all my time with acrylic paint doing my paintings. So again, my easel's a bit of a pain, going right down to that bottom. If you do have a border, that would help with these, or you could paint directly onto a mat or the floor. But obviously, if you're doing it onto the floor, don't do it directly onto carpet. Make sure you've got newspaper down or a protective board or something. So again, my lines aren't completely straight here. I do want them a little bit straighter, but I'm not going to touch it yet. That will be next in the next session once the paint has dried. So I finished. As you can see, I finished it fairly quickly. I would hope you spend a little bit longer on yours than I did on mine. But it isn't a kind of time-consuming, taxing, like worrying if things look perfect or detailed. It is literally about using the kind of therapeutic properties of art to really enjoy creating something, but actually can also look a little bit special. Actually, I've got some examples down here. So I've done this with my own children. So my children are aged 10 and 5, and they have actually started doing their own ones as well. So there's a down here. So even at a younger age, you can get fairly successful results. Now, I'm not saying they've blended theirs perfectly, but actually you can get some really nice results even from a younger age. So I would definitely recommend this as a starter way to help you start creating your own art pieces. Once this is dry, we're going to go back over the top. We're going to just neaten up some of the lines and textures, and then we're going to go into it with a fine paintbrush. Okay, that's where your zero paintbrush will be really helpful, or even a pen if you'd rather use a pen. And we'll be using black to create the silhouettes of the outlines like you saw in that first image I showed you with the balloons. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I've really actually enjoyed this evening, and I'm looking forward to finishing off this picture and videoing the second part of this video soon. See you soon. Bye.